So everybody's here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone and say thank you for joining me this evening for one of what I believe is going to be many discussions on the deconstruction of the dehumanization of Black people. As for everyone watching, I'm Yolanda Ford. I'm the mayor of Missouri City. And before we get started, I want to give everyone an opportunity to introduce yourselves, basically name, position, and what entity you're associated with, so that everyone can be familiar with who you are. So I'll just get started on how everybody's lined up on my screen. And we have Judge Brown as the first person. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for allowing me to be here. My name is Jeremy Brown. I'm the Justice of the Peace here in Harris County for Precinct 7, Place 1. Precinct 7 is pretty much the south side of Houston, Sunnyside, 3rd Ward area, all the way down to Mayor Ford's precinct in Missouri City. And so thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Councilmember Pollard.
Hey, good evening. My name is Edward Pollard. I am a Houston City Council member for District J. District J represents Southwest Houston, Gulfton, Sharpstown, Westwood, Brayburn, and Alief. I'm a proud product of Southwest Houston, and I'm glad to be here this evening. Thank you.
Judge Wallace.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Wallace. I am the judge for County Court at Law number 4 in Fort Bend County.
And we have Councilmember Edwards.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councilmember Edwards of Missouri City. I have an at-large position, and I'm so happy to be here representing Missouri City. I'm a native Missouri City resident, and just excited to have this opportunity to speak on the behalf of Missouri City and myself.
And Councilmember Thomas.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Tiffany D. Thomas, recently elected to the Houston City Council representing District F. District F includes Alief, West Chase, Piney Point, Briar Meadow, Westmont, and Tanglewild. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe everyone, as people may have heard, that has some tie to Missouri City. Most of us represent Missouri City. If not, we have friends and family in Missouri City that live here. So it was very appropriate for me to ask you to be a part of this discussion, as well as everyone on the panel is Black. So I think you will have a reference to where we are right now. Basically, 2 weeks ago, as we all know, we had another instance of police brutality against an African American, which was exposed to the entire world. Systemic racism and acts of violence against Black people by those who should protect us isn't new. So I do want to say also, before we get too far into this discussion, that basically this isn't just isolated to police. This incident that kind of just caused everything to get to where we are now was an actual incident with a police officer and an African-American man, but it doesn't stop there. And I don't think the conversation should stop there. We experience this at our jobs, in our communities, in our schools, on the boards we serve on, and I could go on and on. So I just want to make that clear that this conversation that we're having worldwide has to go further than just police. As a result of what happened with George Floyd and many others who have been brutally killed in our nation, communities across the world are demanding change. And they're demanding change not just from people within their community, but especially their elected officials. And I think that it's so important that we continue to have this conversation amongst ourselves, so that our constituents, our citizens are able to hear where we are and that we hear them. They're asking, our citizens are asking us to implement new policing policies, such as defunding police, requesting additional psychological testing for police, asking that we implement nonviolent de-escalation policing policies, and so much more. So beyond, them coming to meetings or seeing us on these type of calls where they can hear what's going on, what are our thoughts, we have to keep them engaged. This is the things they're asking for, I believe, are absolutely necessary. But as I said a few minutes ago, it just isn't about the police. This is deep rooted into our very foundation of our country. So with this, I want to go ahead and get our conversation started. And I'm okay just if a question comes up with someone while they're responding to whatever we may be asking each other or dialoguing. If a question comes up amongst y'all, please feel free to ask. Don't feel like this can't be a very organic conversation. This isn't scripted. I do have questions that, I want to get answered for the public so they can hear where we are. But I think that while we're talking, if things come up that are important, we need to be able to have that discussion. Now, if we get too far off track, I will bring you back in because we won't be on this call all night. So, but we will have several of these calls. One of the things that I keep hearing is, is this just another call? Are they just gonna, just talk and not get anything accomplished? This isn't just another call, but we are not gonna solve the world's problems in one conversation. And this didn't just start 2-3 weeks ago. This started way back in the 1600s when we were first brought over here. So this conversation is gonna go on for a while. I think the civil rights movement was over 20 years. So at the end of the day, no, it won't take us. Well, I don't think it's not going to take us 20 years to get where we need to be. But I don't think it's going to end in, this first 2-3 weeks of this incident or all the incidents. I think it's going to take us some time to really, like I said, unravel this. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. One of the things that I wanted to discuss with you guys is, do you believe the issues are still being marginalized on a federal, state, and local level? And if so, what's next and why? And just kind of a reference for where I'm going with that is, just yesterday, the president stated that he would not consider renaming Army bases that have Confederate military leaders' names. Clearly, in my opinion, that suggests that we are a long ways away from understanding what's fundamentally wrong here. If our very president is refusing to understand how that is insulting and hurtful, we're a long ways from where we need to be. And the two questions, and so I'm gonna save that question for the council members. And then while the council members are asking that, the judges, I want to ask you two, in reference to judicial reform that's being called for, what are you seeing that's impacting your courtrooms and how? So I'll go ahead and get started with the council members, and then we'll go from there. So Council Member Pollard, if you want to get started.
Sure. Like you said, it's bigger than just the police officers. It stems from racism, and no matter how many laws or policies that we change, if we can't change hearts, then we're never going to be where we need to be. We have to have really thoughtful, meaningful discussions beyond reform, but just about mutual respect, understanding culture and perception of others, people who are different than you, who have different backgrounds and ethnicities, being able to have real dialogue about some of the uncomfortable biases that we may have, the stereotypes that we see. It's all out there. And we have to first recognize that there has been a system and a systematic design that has held Black people oppressed for a long time. And that's across the board, not just in policing, but in healthcare, in education, in jobs. Across the board, there's been a systematic construct that was perfectly designed to keep us at a certain level. And so I heard someone the other day say that the system is broken. But the system really isn't broken. It is doing exactly what it was intended to do. But it's important for us to recognize that and start to understand, okay, if we see that, how can we maneuver through and start to break down those walls? And that's where I think voting comes in. And voting comes in because you start to have people who represent your interests be in a position to change policy and change laws that slowly starts to deteriorate at that system, and you build a new system that is fair and just for all. And I know from my perspective as a city council member, I'm looking at ways to try to do that. And this George Floyd incident has just put the spotlight on policing so that we can start there with certain reforms. And there's things that we can do overnight, and that Mayor Sylvester Turner actually did yesterday with common sense reform, such as no chokeholds, duty to intervene, warning before you shoot. Those are things that we need to have a lot of discussion over. It just needs to be signed into law. And so when you have representation that looks like you and thinks like you and has your same shared interests, you're able to get that done. So we did that. We need to do a lot more, and I believe we will do so.
Okay. Councilmember Edwards.
She's muted. She's muted.
You're muted. There you
I'm
go.
sorry. There we go. That was well said, Councilmember Pollard. But basically, as African Americans, we have been marginalized for many years, and not just starting when George Floyd was murdered and the awareness became, but for multiple years, like I mentioned earlier. And it starts with our educational system, our judicial system, how we are just pretty much African Americans are sentenced at a higher rate as opposed to other races. So within that, like Councilmember Pollard mentioned, it's important for us to get people who have the same type of vision that we have as a community and that represent us, so they can continue to represent us and push policies that will actually speak for the community and not personal feelings that someone might have.
Councilmember Thomas.
Sure, thank you. So before I respond to the question, I would just like to say that I'm very grateful that I'm able to share this moment with my colleague, Councilmember Pollard, because he is, it's a good time to be able to serve with him and others that have the right thing in mind. And so it's nothing like when you are doing battle and you can count on somebody to be in the war with you. So I just want to publicly acknowledge him. The second thing I want to say is that we're extending a level of courtesy. Oh, thank you. We riding to the end, till the wheels fall off, we gonna ride. We're extending a level of sophistication and class to a president who's not presidential, right? So the idea that this person would just have a level of self-awareness to know that it's inappropriate and that you should consider another way, and that he doesn't. So I think at some point we got to stop extending that to that man, because he just won't get it. But if I can take the voting piece a little further, and to me, this was magnified most recently through our budget process in the city of Houston. So, we often talk about voting, and with George Floyd, we've heard rappers and entertainers and you gotta vote. But you know what? That's part A. You have to be completely and committed to this civic process throughout all of the cycles, and people are not. And so the death of George Floyd is definitely monumental, not just in our hearts, but throughout the heart of the world. And so I hope that enthusiasm that we experienced with protest and rioting and emails and letter campaigns, I hope that continues through the entire process for people to understand how the systems that we are elected to represent them actually work. And a lot of people don't have a grasp on how the system works. Therefore, there are demands and requests that we are unable to respond to. So I think once we move beyond knee-jerk, once we move beyond the pain of like this collective heartache, we have really got to get serious about getting our people, not just at the voting booth, but come and sit in these very mundane workshops, right? Come and read this very boring context, because until you do that, then you won't be informed yourself to understand the work that we are actually elected to do. And I think that'll be helpful, and we won't, as elected officials, look like we are not representing the best interests of the people, because if they understand the systems that we're in, then they understand our role.
And I want to add on before I get to the judges and the question that I asked them, I want to add on to what Councilmember Thomas just mentioned. And the biggest thing, yes, a lot of people are saying, I voted, especially since, we've had a Black African-American president. A lot of people have gotten engaged. Now, a lot of people have fallen to the wayside after this last election. And even our local elections, a lot of people have gotten engaged. But they're saying they don't see change. Sure. Well, one, I think Councilmember Thomas said something very important. A lot of people don't understand the process. They don't understand, for us, what happens behind the walls of City Hall. They don't understand that there are things that we have no oversight over, that, that is not our jurisdiction. And that's one of the things that I am very passionate about on getting started, is helping people to understand the process. Just today, I got an email in reference to issues with the constable's office and why am I not doing anything? I'm like, well, the constable is not within the city of Missouri City, and I can make all the phone calls I want, and they're not under my jurisdiction. That's not my authority. So I think that there is clearly a need to educate the community on what each entity does, as well as how to get things done. I've also gotten, today, an email in reference to someone wanting to have an event. And the statement to me was, well, I wanted to do a pop-up event in Missouri City. Y'all don't want anything to go on. And I'm like, well, did you apply for a permit? Did you do this? No, they didn't do any of that. They were like, no, I just want to have an event. And when I called to the city and, saying, hey, I'm going to have this event, they said you couldn't do that. I'm like, it's not you can't do it. It's just a process. So, but yeah, just like Councilmember Thomas said, coming to our meetings, or even for us to start getting out there and educating them, I think it's, it goes both ways. And I'm committed to doing that, to helping people understand that there's a process to getting things done. So I just wanted to add on to that, but I'll go to the judges now. Judge Wallace, if you want to start with judicial reform is being called for, and what are you seeing, and what is the impact to your courtroom?
Well, I didn't get a chance to say thank you. So thank you for the invitation. I'm really, really pleased to be here. But what I really want to talk about in terms of what I'm seeing in my courtroom, I see a lot. And you alluded to this on the flyer. There's a lot that I can't talk about under the code of judicial ethics. There's a lot that I can't address. But what I do want to bring up is something that happens not just in my courtroom, but in courtrooms all across this state, across this country, and that's implicit bias. And that's something that we need to have a conversation about. And I will tell you, when you become a judge, they call it baby judge school. And it's put on by the Texas Center of the Judiciary. It's a wonderful conference. And one of the classes, one of the sessions that we are required to take is called implicit bias. It's called implicit bias in judicial decision making. It's part of the class that we have to take, but we only take it once. And you take it in the midst of all the other classes that you have to take when you first become a judge, and it's never really addressed again. One of the judges in the district court in Harris County, Judge Sandhill, has suggested and proposed that as a part of our continuing judicial education, that judges are required to continue to take implicit bias classes because it addresses what goes to the heart of what happens in a courtroom. And you want to make sure that you have judges that are making decisions that are not steeped in bias, that are not steeped in prejudice or stereotypes, or even opinions that they're not aware that they hold, that they are now projecting onto the decisions that they make. Because no judge wants to be accused of making a decision that's not following the law. We all want to follow the law. That is our primary goal. You ask any judge, and they will tell you, I will set emotion aside to follow the law. But we all know that we all have implicit bias, and those are built in, and they are things that we are born with, that we learn as we grow, as we evolve as a person. So recognizing that we do have them, and then allowing the training so that you recognize when they're more prevalent and how you can correct that decision making so that the implicit bias is not affecting that decision making, I think is one of the things that we as judges have to face.
Okay. Judge Brown?
Thank you again, Mayor Ford. What I see in my courtroom is the result of the systemic racism that has plagued our city of Houston on two fronts. One of which is that I deal in a lot of eviction cases, non-payment of rent. And a lot of the folks that are in my court are young women with children who are facing eviction. And Precinct 7, I'm sensitive because where my precinct is, this is where in the city of Houston, we've decided to concentrate poverty and criminalize it. So you think about George Floyd, where is he from? CUNY Homes. You look at any map of the city of Houston, where is the concentration of poverty? On the southeast and northeast part of town. Where is all the public housing? On the east side of town. Where are all the homeless shelters? On the east side of town. And when we ask for affordable housing on the west part of town, they use terms like, oh, we don't have the land, it's not affordable, right? And so when you have folks that come through your court, and most of the folks that come through my court for eviction is because of non-payment of rent. So what does that go to? We've had stagnated wages since the 70s. Affordable housing and the ability to get affordable housing has decreased since the 1980s, right? And so you see these issues that come through the court. Another piece. Now, I only do in Class C misdemeanors, fine only misdemeanors. You'd think, oh, it's a ticket. It's not that big of a deal. 5 years ago, after the Michael Brown incident in Ferguson, Missouri, the Department of Justice did an investigation, a thorough investigation. One of the things that they found in that investigation is that the majority of the money that the city of Ferguson generated was not through taxes, it was through fines and fees. You look at the Harris County, city of Houston, you look at our budgets, we generate a lot of money through fines and fees. What does that say? If we budget and we say, not from property taxes, not from sales taxes, but we're going to generate money from the people that we stop, that's an inherent conflict. That is saying that we're going to do something not for public safety, but because the city and the county needs the money. I don't blame the city and county. We do need the money. We have the most regressive tax system in the country. And we double tax poor people. And so, again, when folks don't pay those speeding tickets, not because they're a public safety issue, they end up going to jail, their license gets suspended, they cannot work. I've literally had folks come through my court who are in a cycle of debt, a debtor's prison, just because they couldn't afford a $150 ticket.
Right.
Now, is that right? In this America, in the richest country in the world, in the city of Houston, one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Where I live, I can see that 2 cities that MLK talked about in 1967, and the 3 ills, and I see those 3 ills in my courtroom, through the military, through racism, and through poverty, more of the latter. And so our justice system, the money in our justice system is unfathomable. You think when you go to jail, you have to pay, not because you get out of jail because it's not that you're innocent or guilty, it's that you have the money to be bailed out. I'm proud of what Harris County has done on bail reform on the misdemeanor side, but we should do the same thing on the felony side. And don't let folks say, oh, felony cases, those are harder cases. No, most of the felonies are state jail felonies, meaning dope cases. That means you have a little more dope than not. And half the folks in Harris County Jail there are there because they are awaiting trial, not because they are guilty. And they're there because they can't afford to get out. Again, money in our criminal justice system. It has no place, yet it's still there. And while it's still there, it's impacting our Black and brown communities.
Thank you. So with that, so we've pretty much, all of us have been able to identify, as well as even start coming up with how we address some of these issues that are going on within our community that even go beyond the policing issue that's kind of in the forefront right now that we're seeing. So with that, for me, and I'm going to talk about, the next question I want to ask is what partnerships should we prioritize to start building bridges to move progress forward? And for me, I know that for a while, Missouri City kind of set out here like an island. And it's been so important for me to actually build bridges and partnerships with other entities, such as all of you ladies and gentlemen sitting on the phone today. I think it's very important for me to understand what's going on in Judge Wallace's court and Judge Brown's court, the exact things that you guys just explained, for what's happening over in the city of Houston and things that they've been able to do to move forward, and we may be lacking in putting those types of policies in place. So that's very important for me, that we start to prioritize and start building these bridges and partnerships amongst us. Because as long as we work in a silo, we will continue to be held back, especially when we're trying to set, level out the playing field for Black and brown people. So I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what is it exactly that you guys would prioritize in partnerships? So I'll let the city of Houston council members kind of go first, and either Councilmember Thomas or Councilmember Pilar, whichever one want to go first, go ahead and let me know what would y'all prioritize as building bridges and partnerships?
Yeah, for me, I think you have to start building bridges with those who are in stark contrast to whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Right.
And so we can start with policing and police reform, since that's the hot topic of the day. And so for me, the first group that I reached out to when it came to reforms was the Houston Police Officers Union, who represent the rank and file of the police officers. I wanted to talk to them and get their perspective on what were their thoughts on reform. Also give them my insight on how I thought reform would be, and let them know up front that this may be an uncomfortable conversation, but this uncomfortable conversation has to take place. And when you start to dialogue with people and they start to become more comfortable, then you can start to see, okay, what things do we have in common? What are some of these reforms that I lay out that you won't push back on, that you won't have any resistance on? And then you already have those in place. Okay, we know we can push for those. Now for the ones that you are going to push back on, Tell me why, and then allow me an opportunity to tell you why I believe that it's important. And through that discussion and through mutual respect, I think people will see that they will get much further than just trying to keep the divide and overpower or overtalk someone. And so whatever the policy or the reform is, or whatever you're trying to get accomplished, I think the first group, after you recognize your strategy with your group, the next group that you have to reach out to is the group that may be on the other side of the equation, and see what you can do with them up front to get on the same page. It'll make your journey to the end much easier. And I think you will develop relationships that you did not think you could forge otherwise.
Okay. Councilmember Thomas?
Sure. I mean, I echo my colleague's sentiments. I do think we have to start defining partnerships, and a lot of times, we kind of use that word, we just toss it around and we don't set an expectation on what that's supposed to do. Like, so are we just supposed to be in relationship with each other and have access? Are we supposed to collaborate and offer, some meaningful solutions and actually get something done? Because I think a lot of times in, at least politics or elected office, it is, the thing to do to be in relationship, but we don't often see the real collaboration that's necessary to affect state, county, and local change. We have not seen that continuum from a Texas legislative to the city to the county, where we're all in the same vein doing this work. So I think, we have to, have relationships with people on the other aisle, other spectrum of our thoughts. But I think it's important for us to set an expectation on what are we attempting to do. And so when we're having these conversations, how can we, measure ourselves with how we spend our time with each other and what we're talking about, and what do we really want to craft, right? So my colleague and I, we have 4 years. And so in 4 years, there's some things that we have to work through, because there's some things that we want to accomplish individually and collectively. And I think that's something we have to challenge our constituencies for, like, what do you want? And when I was running for District F, I would often ask that question, and they wouldn't know. They didn't know what they wanted. I think a part of it, they've never been asked, what do you want? And then they never felt like they had someone who would be willing to champion that on their behalf. So again, I think it goes back to education and giving people the space to feel like they can participate in these same partnerships, so they can have a seat in their own change,
Yeah, absolutely. Councilmember Edwards?
Thank you. To add on to that, I think it's important that we have a relationship with our police department, but I also think it's important for us to incorporate the community. And a method that should be incorporated is called restorative justice. So basically, it would allow, if someone wants to burglarize the house, the community will come together and the burglar will speak to the victim, and they will begin to have the dialogue of how the burglar affected the family, and just kind of have some type of correlation. So when crimes are committed, that type of relationship could be understood on both sides. And so with what we have going on today, it's important that if we have this type of incident in our own house or backyard, that we're able as leaders to hold everyone accountable. But you will have a community input, and everyone will have the circle of input and understand what's going on and how it affects each other from different points of view.
Okay. And Judge Wallace? You're muted.
I try to be considerate on Zoom, and then I forget that I'm being considerate. I think one of the partnerships that we should definitely build on is reaching back into our school systems, reaching into our youth groups and agencies that are working with the youth in the community. As a judge, I think that's important, because these kids need to understand the consequence for their behavior sometimes. I don't think that's clear. They also need to understand that there are situations and circumstances where you can find yourself in a courtroom that are not all bad. One of the things that I try to do is I try to bring groups of children and students into my courtroom and introduce them to a courtroom, so that the first time they ever step foot in a courtroom they're not intimidated, they're not scared. They've been here before under a situation that was pleasant, and they get a courtroom tour. They get to see where I sit, where the lawyers sit. We take them in the back. We take them to the jury room. We show them the holding cell. Partnering with those kind of agencies and groups and organizations that are working with the youth to introduce them to the justice system in a way that's not intimidating, that's not frightening, that is not the first time you go to court, it's because you're in trouble. I think that's important from a judicial standpoint.
Okay, and Judge Brown?
From a judicial standpoint, I think one of the partnerships, I think something we need to expand upon. If a person goes to jail, they have a right to an attorney. It's a Supreme Court case called Gideon versus Wainwright. There's a growing movement across the country to extend that same right to counsel for folks that are facing issues that are deemed basic necessity, family issues, education, housing. And so, again, a lot of evictions come through my court, and the majority of folks that come through my court do not have an attorney. The majority of my folks are working poor and poor and don't understand the complexities of the legal system. And so we should put local dollars like we do for the criminal right to counsel. There should be a civil right to counsel. I think kids should have the right to counsel because in the state of Texas, we have deemed education a right. Unfortunately, for Black boys, they are over suspended. They're over, everything overly done because of whatever disconnect those teachers have with those kids. And again, kids understand, like we do, the issue of fairness, right? And so they understand. I had some students from Harvard Law School come to through my court last semester, and they evaluated because we do Class C tickets for kids and we do truancy for kids, and they evaluated a lot of the disciplinary measures that we do in HISD. And unfortunately, kids understand that some teachers and some administrators pick sides. So wouldn't it be fortunate if we understand that those kids have rights too, that they should have a right to counsel? Fort Bend ISD has gotten in trouble for over suspending Black and brown kids. HISD, we don't suspend them, we'll take you right to jail. Like, again, are we as kids, particularly our Black and brown poor kids, are learning from an early age that the system is very punitive and that it's against them. So of course they're going to be overly aggressive. Of course they're going to lash out. I lashed out as a kid, but because I had parents at home, I was treated different. But a lot of times we hear from our administrators, oh, well, it's the mama's fault, it's the daddy's fault. But something like my grandmother told me a long time ago, a kid can't help who they born to. And unfortunately, in the city of Houston, like many urban areas, it's the issue of who they're born to dictate how they're treated.
Okay. So,
and Mayor Ford, I just wanted to add something really quickly to that. To what Brown was saying is that just to be clear, if a child is referred into the juvenile justice system, those courts, those cases that are not Class C, they land in my court, in the county courts. And if the child is indigent and cannot afford an attorney is appointed to them. And so I just want to make that clear that there is representation on the misdemeanor level for those children through the court-appointed attorney system.
Right, for those kids because they may face jail time, Class B.
Right. Well, no. It's just anytime they get a referral.
Yeah, but I'm saying because of the county court at law, I'm saying on the ticket side, I'm saying on the suspension side, I'm just saying the disciplinary issues, and anytime a kid is not in the schoolhouse because of a disciplinary issue, I think we should extend that same right to counsel.
Okay. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I wanted to have this very broad conversation because as we start to drill down in all these issues, the different types of partnerships, I heard everything from partnerships with different entities, different counties, different levels of government, federal, state, local, the community, as we start to drill down, and I think Councilmember Thomas made a very good point also, going to the community and what is their actual ask. So as we start, from a judicial standpoint, what is their ask? There are some things that you as judges, y'all automatically see. Don't get me wrong. I understand that. But there are some other specific things that I would like the community to weigh in on, that it may not be very obvious from you sitting on one side as the judge and the citizen sitting on the other side as the person listening to the judge and not really understanding what's going on. And I think we have to start having those conversations. And I think that goes back to understanding the process and how things work. And then also having to change that process. How do we deconstruct, dismantle this system that the Councilmember Pollard mentioned that was never put in place to work for us? It was never put there. It's working exactly how it should work, but it wasn't put in place to work for us. And I think starting off with this very broad conversation is so important, so that, like I said, as we start to drill down, we can, meet in smaller groups. I will be inviting all of you ladies and gentlemen back, and it will be in a smaller, more specific. I've been jotting down these issues and just kind of the things y'all have talked about, so that as we move forward to be able to get things done. One of the things that I kind of see, just as me being a council member to a mayor, a lot of times you'll have your ask, and staff will go and they will go do whatever they interpret it as your ask. But if you don't stay with them through the process and meet periodically with them, they'll get all the way back to the end, and it didn't address every point of your ask. And that's why I think these conversations are important. So it's not just talking just to be talking, it's to make sure that we are having those conversations as things move forward, because I truly believe at this point that we will move forward, because of the resilience of our youth today. I just really believe we are going to move forward with really dismantling this system that wasn't made to really work for us. But we have to keep our fingers on the pulse. We have to really understand, as this moves forward, like what's going on. So we are getting close to our hour, and I don't want to go past that. But before we leave this evening, I want to ask y'all, if there was one thing that you could say to citizens listening tonight, what would that be and why? What would be the most important takeaway from tonight on this meeting, on this call? And I will start with Councilmember Edwards. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm
There you
sorry.
go.
Basically, just having a self-evaluation. Everyone thinks racism can be fixed, but it's really within yourselves. And if you take some type of time to analyze yourself, you will actually see whether, those issues lie in your heart. And it's also important for us to have a great communication with the community as leaders. And if something was to happen in our backyard, that we will have enough strength and courage to actually hold those people accountable for their actions. So.
Okay. And I'll go to Judge Brown, since I've been making you last the whole time tonight. Judge Brown.
I think, first of all, thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being a part of this panel. This is very insightful, and I'm excited about what we can do. I would say this, I know it was, I guess the 1600s when the slaves came to America, but the racialized slavery started in 1455 in when the Portuguese realized that they can make a profit selling Africans. And in doing that, it became about capitalism and it became about money instead of people, right? And so in the issues when the Confederacy ended, when the Confederacy went away from the Union, in their Articles of Confederation, it was their interest, their business interest of slavery, right? Right now, as we face a pandemic, the number one concern of our governor and our president is business interests. And so we need to stay vigilant of certain narratives that is presented, that those same narratives were used to keep us in bondage, and those same narratives are still being used to keep us in bondage. And so when people talk about, being pro-business, when people talk about opening up our economy, it's always at the disadvantage of Black, particularly poor Black people.
All righty. Councilmember Thomas. Did we lose her?
No, I was trying to unmute my,
Okay.
it wasn't moving as fast. That's a loaded question, right? Like, what do we want our people to do or know? I would say today is like budget blues. So we just voted our budget yesterday. And so I think when you're a candidate and you're running for office, people like to, they'll say, oh, you're affable and oh, you're so approachable. But then when the moment you win, they automatically think you're a robot. And so I would just, right, that you don't experience the same things, that Corona or COVID-19 is not impacting your life the same way with your family, or the collective trauma of witnessing another man die at the hands of police, right? So another Black man rather. So I would like our, constituents to know, like, we're very human as well, and that for a large portion of it, we're attempting to navigate this information and this system, sometimes a couple of steps ahead of you, right? Because if things change so fast and the systems we move in are so old, right? This stuff has been going on for decades, if not centuries, and then they expect in your first year and a half that you're going to deconstruct it on your back. And so, as we move through elected terms, I would ask residents to understand that it's a two-way process, and that I get to hold residents just as accountable as they get to hold me. So I need them at budget workshops before it's time for the vote. I need them at committee meetings on public comments in order to understand, so we can be fully informed and actually vote their best interest.
Exactly. Judge Wallace?
I apologize. My internet's a little spotty, so it kicked me out, but I came back as soon as I possibly could. So I think the question that you were asking is, what's the one thing that we would say to the citizens that are listening tonight? And one thing I would say is that we work for you, and hold us to that. Whether it be a judge or a council member or a mayor, a commissioner, anybody. We are public servants and we work for you. So ask questions, challenge what we're doing. Come, I invite anybody. Well, it's a little bit more difficult now with COVID-19 because we have restricted and limitations in my courtroom. But prior to March, I would invite anyone to come and sit in my courtroom, watch what's going on, stay afterwards, ask me questions if there's something you don't understand. Because it is a public courtroom, with the exception of my juvenile matters. The courtroom is open to the public. And so we invite you to come and watch and see what we do. Learn what judges do, why it's important that you know who you're electing as a judge, because what we do every single day in our courtrooms, it matters. It touches the community. So understand what that is and how that fits into everything that goes on in our county, and hold us accountable, as Councilmember Thomas was saying. And I'm going to do the same. If you have questions, I'm going to answer them. I'm going to do my best to resolve whatever issues you have. But just know that when you come in my courtroom, you're going to get a judge that's fair. You're going to get a judge that's going to give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. And then I'm going to make a decision not based on emotion, but based on what the law says I have to do. So that's what I would say to the people that are listening today. Understand what judges do. Learn how every part of government works for you, and then make those elected officials work for you.
Okay. Councilmember Pollard.
Thank you, Mayor Ford, for having me again, and I want to thank all of the other panelists for joining us this evening. I agree. When I talk to kids in elementary, middle, and high school, and I try to break down the importance of voting, the importance of being civically engaged, the importance of understanding how to maneuver this system, I first asked them, remember how you played basketball at recess when you were in kindergarten? Everybody's running around, everybody's double dribbling, travel, not taking the ball out properly. But as you mature and you understand the game and you understand the rules, things get more organized, more sophisticated. Now you're running plays, you have defensive strategies, everybody's playing together, and you actually know how to maneuver the rules of the game so that you can have the best outcome possible. The same thing works in politics. And it starts with who represents you. So if you don't even know who represents you on school board, city council, commissioner's court, in the state legislature, in Congress, then for one, you're automatically behind the curve because you don't even know the people in place that make the rules. And you can't maneuver the rules if you don't know who the players are. So the first thing I would tell the public is go on Google, type in who represents me. You'll see a website that comes up where you can put your address and zip code, and it will tell you all the people that represent your area of town. That's very important. Then you can look those people up to see what their interests are. How do they vote? Are they like-minded, or are they someone that you feel is not in the best interest of your community? If they are in the best interest of your community, reach out, see how you can be engaged, see how you can give them insight on ways in which you want to help improve. If they do not have your interest, then mobilize the community. You all come together, identify someone to run against that person, get out there and work, and then unseat that person so that you can have someone in there that will make change. It's just not enough to go and vote. I mean, in some of these seats, we've been voting for the same people for the last 40, 50 years. You know, it's not important just to go vote, but it's important to have people in office that represent your best interests. And so it's a collaborative effort. It's not going to be all on the office holder, and it's not going to be all on the community. It's a joint effort between both of us. But if you don't know who represents you, then you're like those kids who are running around at recess in elementary who don't know the rules. And you cannot think that you are going to master the game if you do not know the rules. So if you want to reach out to me, my direct email address is districtj@houstontx.gov. That's districtj@houstontx.gov. And if you have any things that you want to learn about my platform or ways in which you can get engaged with our office, please reach out. Thank you very much.
Okay. And I'll give everybody else an opportunity to give your contact information. So Judge Brown, if you want to give your contact information for anyone to reach out to you.
Yeah, you can call me on my cell phone, 713-256-6495. If you have a ticket in my court, please don't call me because I can't fix it for you. Thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
I can be reached at 281-401-9469.
Okay. Judge Wallace.
The best way to reach me is via email because I may or may not be able to answer the phone. And that is just my name, toni.wallace@fortbendcountytx.gov. If you go to the Fort Bend County website, you can go directly to the county court at law number 4, website, and my contact information is there as well. There's a phone number on the website that you can reach me at. But usually the best way to reach me is by email.
Okay. Councilmember Thomas?
Sure. I mean, they set the bar really high giving out phone numbers and things. Like, I barely.
Okay, when he came out with the
Right,
personal
phone
cell, I
number.
was like, oh,
What?
oh.
I barely keep my phone charged. So, okay.
Mike Jones.
I mean, geez. So you can reach me directly at districtf@HoustonTX.gov, and you can follow on social media. Facebook is Tiffany D. Thomas, and Twitter is Tiffany for A-Leaf, FOR A-Leaf.
All righty. And if anyone needs to reach me, you can email me at yolanda.ford@MissouriCityTX.gov, or you can go to the City of Missouri City's website and you can send me a direct message through the website. Do not send me messages via social media. Yes, I have social media presence, but the amount of messages and the communication that goes on there, I'd rather you send me a message via my city's email or the city's website for you to contact me. And I will definitely get back with you. I get on average probably about 500 emails almost every 2 days or so. So it might be a day or two before I get back to you. And unlike the city of Houston, we don't have, me and Councilmember Edwards, we have to manage everything ourselves. We don't have staff in our office, so be a little patient with us. So we don't have chiefs of staff. We are our chief of staff. We are council members. We are the mayor. So, you know, we have to send these things ourselves. So just be a little patient with us, but we will definitely get back to you. And I'm going to circle back with everyone on the panel so that we can do an update to this conversation in a couple of months, and how or whatever things that we've implemented to move forward to help our community move forward. And if you guys have any ideas on how we can make this conversation better, please send me that information. And for all those watching, please send us any points that we can address, and I'll make sure that when we have our next conversation that we can address those things so these conversations are productive. I want to thank everyone on the panel tonight. I really and truly appreciate everyone for participating. I asked everyone who was asked to be on this panel is newly elected, as well as, like I said, you have some tie to Missouri City. So at the end of the day, I sincerely appreciate you being on this panel and taking an hour out of your day. If anybody who knows me, I am big on time. Look at Councilmember Edwards, she's laughing because she knows I'm serious about time. Time and money, don't waste it. You never get more time and you work too hard for your money. So at the end of the day, you don't waste it. So I want to say thank you. Does anyone have any last thoughts before we go? If not, we'll go ahead and disconnect the call.
Mayor Ford, I just want to say thank you for presenting this platform and giving us all an opportunity to speak. But I think, like you said, you're never going to get any more time or any more money. And so we shouldn't be wasting it just talking. We should all be about doing something and being active and taking away some action items that we are going to do. So when we circle back on this conversation, I don't want us just rehashing what we already said. I want us to have some results from what we've discussed today. So I am on board for that, and you call me and let me know where you need me, and I will be there.
Okay, Judge Wallace, you were muted at the very beginning. I thought it was unmuted.
No, we heard you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it was muted on my end. Maybe it was just my internet.
Councilmember Thomas heard me.
Yeah, we heard it.
Okay, if you were unmuted, that's fine. It was just muted on my end for some reason.
I was just saying thank you for bringing us all together, and we got to get to work.
Oh, thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mayor.
Bye-bye.
All right, good night.